Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is a new year, and so I figured that I would do sort of a wrap up on last year and do a top 5 books of 2014 recap for you guys. These are books that didn't necessarily come out in 2014, but they're books that I read in 2014. I say top 5. Some of them are like a whole series. I counted as one. This is going to be in no particular order. It's not going to be conclusive of every book that I read in 2014 that I liked. For example, The 100,000 Kingdoms is not in this list, even though I completely loved it. It was like life-changing, but I already did a full review on the series. I'll put a link down below, so I left it out of this one because I figured that I would focus on series that I haven't really talked about as much. Maybe I've only mentioned here or there, or haven't mentioned at all. Let's get into it, shall we? So first on the list is going to be an adult fiction, adult fantasy series that I don't think I've mentioned at all on this series. It's called Cold Magic by Kate Elliott. So this is the first one, and then the second one is Cold Fire, and the third one is Cold Steel. So we've got Cold Magic, Cold Fire, Cold Steel. I think I mentioned Cold Fire in a book haul once, but I've never actually talked about the series. This series is the overarching title series is called Spirit Walker. It's an alternate history, fantasy, ice punk, adventure, political story. It's amazing, is what it is. I did a full episode on this series that's going to be coming out on the podcast at some point. We recorded them all out of order, so I don't remember exactly when it's coming out, but I'll put a link to the podcast down below. It's like an hour and a half long, and we talk about the whole series, so I'm kind of trying to condense here. So the main character is named Kat Hasibarahal. She has been raised by her aunt, uncle, and her cousin, who's about the same age as she is, and so her and her cousin are best friends, and they're students of the local university, but their whole sort of world gets upturned when one of the cold mages shows up, and cold mages, we learn, are sort of like the nobility of this world. There's actually a separate aristocracy, and the cold mages have nothing to do with politics, but they're extremely important figures in the society, so they're sort of in between just like the gentry, and actually they're kind of like the gentry, actually, in terms of like where their social status is. One of the cold mages shows up, and basically they demand that the oldest Hasibarahal daughter be given to them to be married because of a contract that Kat's aunt and uncle had signed many years ago. And it turns out that since Kat is the oldest of the family, it is now her job to marry in this cold mage, whose name is Andavai. And basically she gets whisked away into this world of politics and magic, and it turns out that she might have some powers that she didn't really know about or didn't really know the extent of, and it's just, the world building is so intricate because it turns out that there's this whole backstory of how the world is the way it is, where in our world, Rome and the Carthaginian Empire, I'm not totally sure how to pronounce that, were fighting for many, many years, and then Rome basically wiped them out, and so they've been completely, their hit culture was basically completely erased, but in this version, they fought to a standstill, so basically they are descendants of the Carthaginian Empire, and then there's also this whole thing about there was a ghoul plague in Africa, and so basically a bunch of Africans ended up migrating north into Europe and sort of took over Europe. So it's like reverse colonialism, basically, where all of the people in power are very, very dark-skinned. So Andavai actually is very dark-skinned. And so the whole dynamic is reversed, and it's really, really fascinating, and the world building and the characters are amazing. So, and basically, like, it caused a lot of fanish shipper anguish, and it almost felt like fic in some ways, and I mean that as a compliment, where the relationship dynamic and some of the relationship tropes were like the best kind of fanfiction, where she is just like she actually has a line about like him and his annoyingly handsome face, and he's like clearly smitten but trying to play it cool, and she just thinks he's an asshole for a really long time. Anyway, it's fantastic. So the whole series is very long and very complicated, but it's really, really good. So I simplified a whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, the first book is Cold Magic, and then Cold Fire, where she travels to basically Haiti, I guess. It's like an island in the Caribbean, and there's a whole like race of troll creatures that are basically dinosaurs like I said, it's really complicated, but it's really amazing. And then the last one is Cold Steel, which has a lot more warfare in it. I'm gonna try to wrap that up so that we can keep going because I have a lot to talk about. The next one on this series is actually a standalone. Again, I think I mentioned it in a haul a long time ago, but I never actually talked about the book. I read it fairly recently. The next book on the list is called Salvage by Alexandra Duncan. Yes. This one did not get a lot of press, and I think that that is unfortunate. A standalone, which might be part of it, and it's like a sci-fi futuristic dystopia that doesn't have a villain. So the main character has been living on this ship for a long time, for her entire life, and it's a ship that actually like never settles on Earth. So individual people, by which I mean men, will go down to Earth. It's a merchant ship, it's a trade ship, so it's basically always traveling, and so she's never been to Earth. She's lived her whole life on this ship, and the social structure is very stratified. It's very gender divided, where the women tend to do like menial household tasks and the men go out and have these trade agreements. And there's also a series of merchant ships, and they're just like one in a whole like system. And they have this interesting sort of dialect that you realize is specific to the ship that she's on, or sort of specific to the system of ships that they're on, because they've isolated themselves so thoroughly. Their social structures have become very rigid, and their language has changed over time. And I found that part of it really grounding and really fascinating. And even normally when people try to sort of make up fake slang, it ends up being terrible, but in this one it actually felt immersive rather than distracting, so I was actually really impressed with that. And basically it's about, she ends up sort of accidentally breaking one of the social rules and is outcasted down to Earth, and it's just sort of about her learning to live in the new world and coming of age and overcoming trauma and learning to trust again. And I was struggling to think of a book like it that I had read, and I really couldn't think of any for a long time. And finally, the only thing that came to mind was Deerskin by Robin McKinley, which is a book that I've mentioned before. I think I have it. Yes. Deerskin by Robin McKinley is another one. It's a fairy tale retelling. So it's basically about a girl who undergoes a terrible trauma at the hands of her father and then escapes and learns to live her life again. So it's actually very similar in structure to Salvage. But these were the only two of this type of story that I could find, or that at least that I've read. So it's not necessarily the lightest book in terms of content, so I was sort of surprised that it was a YA, although I think maybe Deerskin's considered a YA too, which I don't know how I feel about that. But I think that it handles the subject matter with grace and care, and then, like I said, I find the world really immersive, and kind of sad that it's a standalone, but I totally get why it is. Like, it feels complete at the end of it. So again, this one is Salvage by Alexandra Duncan. And so I think we need to move on to the next one. This one is gonna be another young adult one. This is actually a trilogy, the only YA futuristic dystopia trilogy that I have on this pile, which I have mentioned before, I think. I don't remember. I think what I mentioned is that I've read the first two. I don't think I'd mentioned that I'd read the third one, because the third one didn't come out until recently. So this is The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken. Since I think I've mentioned this one, I'll try to just recap it quickly. This is the one where children start dying at like age 10, and then the ones that don't die get psychic powers and get sent to a concentration camp. So the main character is 16 at the start of the book, and she's been in a concentration camp for 6 years. So, she ends up getting broken out of it by what's known as the Children's League, which is, an organization of people in their 20s-ish who are outside the range of, being able to have powers, but, are sympathetic to the cause of the Psy kids. PSY is what they're referred to in the book, Psy, like psychic, basically. So I got through Darkest Minds, and then the second one is Never Fade. I got the two of those actually from Comic-Con last year, but I didn't read them until this year. And I'm almost glad that I did that, because it meant that I didn't have to wait as long for book 3, which is In the Afterlight, because they decided apparently that the whole series needed to make a sentence, because it's The Darkest Minds, Never Fade, in the Afterlight. I don't know. So basically she ends up having to go on the run. She ends up, because we find out that her power is sort of seeing memories from people, she ends up seeing a memory of one of the members of the Children's League actually murdering children her age, so she escapes from them and ends up joining up with some other Psy kids, and they end up sort of going on the run, and she forms this connection with them. But the thing that I really liked about the series was, first of all, there's no love triangle, which is incredible and amazing, and I really, really appreciate that. And the other thing is that the emotional intelligence of the characters is really well done, where they don't have needless drama. Like the fact that they're on the run from government agents is drama enough, and they don't need to add unnecessary pettiness or jealousy, and they have this sort of instinctive trust of each other because everyone their age is in a similar situation. They have this instinctive need to be around each other and to trust each other and be with each other, and so I find that really rewarding in a series. And she also doesn't ignore the realities of what being in those kinds of camps would do to someone psychologically. You know, all of the kids are suffering from various forms of PTSD, and it comes out in various different ways. Like Ruby, the main character, has difficulty disclosing things to people because she's been quiet for so long. Like there's something we find out in the very beginning of the books is they were kept quiet in her camp, and so she has this instinctive need to keep everything down because she's been doing it for so long, she's been hiding everything for so long. And then there's another character who just doesn't talk, period. She will, you know, gesture and she'll write things out, but she refuses to talk. And it's not that she like physically can't, but she psychologically refuses to. And so, like I said, it plays out in these different ways that are realistic and interesting and kind of heartbreaking, but you know, it's all about them sort of trying to work through it. And it was pretty much the only YA futuristic dystopia trilogy that has a satisfying conclusion. Various trilogies just sort of unravel by the third book, and this one is one of the only ones, now that I finished the series, I feel like I can say this. This is one of the only YA futuristic dystopia trilogies that actually manages to maintain its structure and strength throughout all three books. So I believe the overarching series is The Darkest Minds. So it's just the name of the first book is the overarching series. So the first one is Darkest Minds, and then Never Fade, and then In the Afterlight is the last one. So I loved this series. I don't think, I can't say enough good things about it. So, but I'm gonna try to move on because I've been having some battery issues and I'm losing the light. So the next one is part of a series, but so far I've only read the first one. If you watched my Booktobathon videos, you will know what this is. This is Have Mercy. It is an adult fantasy book that features magical, alchemical, sassy robot dragons. Amazing! I don't think I necessarily covered in my Booktobathon video how great the actual character of Have Mercy is. At one point in a future book, I've been told, I haven't actually read this one, but she actually says something about how, like, learn some manners, you rude little fucker. She is incredibly foul-mouthed, she is incredibly sarcastic, she is incredibly rude, and Rook, her pilot, loves her beyond all reason. Which is, like, my favorite dynamic. Rook also is kind of an asshole. He ends up being enjoyable by the end, but in the first couple chapters he's like pretty insufferable. He speaks in this narration that's very low class, so you know, he's not very educated, he grew up in the slums, he has that sort of narcissistic pride of someone who raised themselves up through the ranks, but is also put in a situation where he's surrounded by a bunch of 20-something-year-old men and they're all constantly competing with each other, so it's not a great situation. And then, since of course Rook caused an international incident, they're basically given a manners coach, which goes super well. And then the other plotline that's happening is about the sorcerer who gets outlawed because of an indiscretion with a prince, and so he gets sent off to his like country estate that his brother owns, and ends up meeting and falling in love with the tutor that's there, and so it's him and the tutor are the two point of view characters for that one, whereas it's Rook and the manners coach for the other two the two characters for that one. So there's a scene where Rook takes Tom, the manners coach, out on the dragon, and afterwards, Have Mercy, the dragon, basically, like, Rook is talking about how much he hates Tom, and Have Mercy's just kind of like, I don't know, I kind of like him. And he's like, you traitor. And she's like, I don't know, it kind of reminds me of you. And it's so great. I love the dragon. The dragon is so good, and I have ordered the rest of the series. I should be getting them in the mail very soon. They weren't in any bookstore. These apparently didn't do very well, I guess, which is terrible and tragic and needs to be remedied. But I couldn't find the books in any Barnes & Noble anywhere, so I had to place an order for them, but I should be getting them soon, and I'm really excited to read the rest of this series. I will let you guys know how that goes. Yeah, so the first book is Have Mercy. I don't remember what the name of the second one is. The authors are Jada Jones and Daniel Bennett. So the last book / series that I have to talk to you about is the Lindburn Legacy by Sarah Rees Brannon. This is almost cheating because I read the rest of the series not in 2014, but the final book came out in 2014 and I only recently read it, so I'm gonna go with it counts. So the first one is called Unspoken, and then the second one is Untold, and the last one is Unmade. So the whole series is the Lindburn Legacy. It's basically a modern day gothic / detective story where the main character is basically a like spunky Nancy Drew / Veronica Mars type person. She's very earnest and determined, and it's really, really great. Her name is Cami, and she's also had this voice in her head named Jared, and she doesn't know if Jared is a real person or if she's crazy or what the deal is, but they've been talking to each other their entire lives. And then the Lindburn family comes back to the town, and the Lindburns have been this sort of mythical family. They were like the premier family in the town, but they've been gone basically most of Cami's life, if not all of Cami's life. And so they come back, and it turns out that one of the Lindburn sons is Jared. This sparks this whole, drama to the whole series, and so they're trying to figure out what happened that made them, have this psychic connection. And Cami is like fiercely independent. Basically, she's been in love with Jared her whole life, but she doesn't want to be beholden to anyone. She doesn't want to be owned by anyone. So whereas he has had a very dysfunctional upbringing, and the only way that he knows how to have any kind of emotional connection is with a sense of belonging and a sense of ownership. They have this very complicated relationship, and Jared in a lot of ways is reacting very badly to the fact that she's real, and sort of extrapolating, it's probably because he doesn't trust her to stick around if she's real because of his own upbringing. So also he doesn't really trust himself because he thinks that he's kind of a monster, because he has been accused of killing his father. So it's a whole big mess. Unmade, the third one, I cried basically throughout the entire second half of the book, which I don't usually do with books. I don't usually have actual tears coming out of my face, but that happened. Sarah Rees Brannon does a lot of really interesting family dynamics, and she cares a lot about relationships that aren't just romantic, although she does also care about romantic relationships. Just the plot is really, really interesting. It's about, sorcerers and sacrifice and sort of what we do to protect the things that we love. So it's a hell of a ride, is what I'd say. Like I said, the whole series is fascinating and complicated, and I cried through most of the second half of the third book, which might be a recommendation and might be a warning. Maybe both. So I think that is it for my top 5 of 2014. I know that most people probably would have put these up around the 30th or 31st, but you know what? Sometimes the only day that you have free to do a video is January 3rd, and everyone can just deal with that. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And of course, if you feel like it, please feel free to leave your top 5 of 2014, partly just because if I've read them, I'll enjoy talking about them, and if I haven't read them, I might take it as a recommendation. I have an overwhelming to-be-read pile, but I am always working through it, and I always like to discover new things. So going into 2015, I am actually going to be attempting I think it's Pop Sugar, put out a 2015 reading challenge, and I counted 49, but I'm just gonna say 50 books, and there's like a different category for each book, and so I will put a link to the post. I reblogged it on Tumblr, so I'll put a link to that post down below, so if you want to join me, feel free. And, you know, I'll probably be doing updates on that as well as my normal haul, review, wrap-up type videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!